Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the Torah Lighthouse Project. I'm Avram continuing our series of God's interview of the letters. And it's the most interesting and provocative look at God's relationship to the tools of creation. And it certainly causes us to stop and wonder and think and perhaps rethink a lot of ideas about how this world is held together. We've been working our way backwards from the Aleph Bet, and we know that when we say Aleph Bet Gimel Daled, we're building the spiritual power from emanation to completion. And when we count backwards, Taf Shin Kuf Reish Kuf Tzadik Pei, etc. When we count backwards, we're actually reversing the flow of energy in creation. That's called Din. That there are these two powers that are everywhere in everything, the power of God's expansion and the power of contraction. And so I just to point that out because we are working our way backwards through the letters, and that might seem anti what we would normally believe would be the order of things, but no, the Zohar always has its reasons for what it does. Now, we have worked our way up through the letter Mem. And Mem, we learned Mem that Mem, God said, no, you can't be the first letter in the Torah because I need you to be the first letter in the concept called Melech. And so you see, it's almost like a literary decision or an editing. You can imagine, sitting in the offices of some Manhattan publisher. What's the first word going to be in our book? Breshit, in the beginning. What a wonderful, simple, direct beginning. Well, what about starting the word with Melech? Well, then we're going to have to build everything around that initial concept. And so too, God has told the letters many times, no, I can't use you. You're fitting to be used to create the beginning of the Torah, but I can't move you out of your place because you have another function in the place that I put you initially. And so, and also he mentions here in the last paragraph from last week that the Lamed and the Chaf, and if you look at the way the Aleph Bet's written, Mem, if we go backwards, there's before Mem is what? Lamed. And before Lamed is what? Kaf. And if you read backwards, you have the concept Melech woven into the Aleph Bet in reverse order from what we're usually reading right to left. Left to right, we have Melech. And so God also tells the Mem and Lamed and Kaf, you guys can't move either. So don't try. Which is an interesting take. But also, when we try to look at it at a deeper level, we see why is God telling Rabbi Shimon these things? Or why is Eliyahu Navi was the chief teacher of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? Once he went into the cave in Meron for 13 years, we're told in the beginning that the great prophet Eliyahu would come to teach them in the morning and the evening. And so why is this teaching here? What does God want us to get from it? So I ask myself these kind of questions because I know that they're legitimate, and I feel like I want to know. I didn't get into Judaism or Orthodoxy or Zohar because it was just something cool to do. I really wanted to know why. So I could ask all of you that question, and maybe you have an answer. You'd like to text or write it in. Why is this here? What are we learning? So the first answer I came up with, of course, is appreciation for the perfection, the order of the letters, their contribution to the conceptual creation of reality. In other words, because before God created the universe, there was no concept of king. It was an uncreated idea. Now, maybe in God's mind somewhere he had this concept, But it was still, in terms of his creation, there was no idea of king. There was no idea of light and dark. It was just God. There was no idea of man. There was no idea of Torah. Though all these concepts needed to be created before they were actually enacted and metamorphosized into the world. So what we're really doing here is going back in time to a pre-creation moment. Now, the beginning of this whole drasha, weeks and weeks ago, we learned that God spent 2,000 years mishtasheh im otiot. Mishtasheh is from the Lashon shashuim, and shashuim is a phrase that we see in Hasidut, the shashuei olam haba. The pleasure of the righteous in the world to come is called that. So we're working backwards to get the pleasure that God had with the letters in the beginning, before creation. The shashuei olam haba. Now, can you imagine that you could have such pleasure from a lettering system? Letters on a page? What is that? What kind of pleasure is that? How pnimi, how non-related to the physical world at all, except the only thing physical about the letters is their shape and their sound. And a tiny, tiny bit is the idea of numbers. But numbers are still very abstract ideas. So we are working backwards in time, and we've gone to this time of this God's pleasure with the letters. So I think that's another answer to our question: why God gave over through through Eliyahu Navi to Rabbi Shimon to give to us, and Rabbi Abba's they're writing, and Rabbi Elazar's they're listening, and 2,000 years later we have this document. And of course, it can arouse many other questions, many other ideas. If I was a linguistic master, and if I was a scientist of linguistics, they've already done this where they've mapped the sounds of the letters with a computer, and we see that the sound produces an image similar to the image of the letters. That when you say the letter, like we're going to begin tonight with kaf, that if you say the letter kaf, right? And we've done this in meditation. Your mouth is actually is creating a sound that mimics the shape, which is quite an amazing thing. That when you say mem, your mouth is mimicking a form, a structure, an energy pattern that looks like a mem. And that's what scientists have mapped these letters using computers, and this is what they've come up with. So, they're walking into the Kabbalah through the scientist doorway, and we're walking in through the Baruch Hashem, the Zohar, the broad gateway of the Zohar. Okay. So now, what happens after the letters Lamed? A mem has been put back in his place because he's got to be part of the concept king, which is next to the letter Lamed and Chaf. Well, and he uses it, and it specifies the Chaf Sofit. So the Lamed and the Chaf don't get an interview. They're already told the same answer that the Kaf got, that the Mem got, excuse me. You cannot move because you're part of the concept of Melech, and that's one of the Ikar, essential ideas of the world in the creation, that there is a king. So the Zohar goes right to the regular Kaf, not the Kaf Sofit, because the Kaf Sofit is, of course, the letter used in the word Melech, but the regular Kaf, Ba'ushata Nachta min Kadmohi at Kaf. Me'al Korsai Yikara. This is the only letter that enters his interview this way. How does he enter the interview? Not like most people through the office door, It says that he came down. Nachta min Kadmohi. It came from the ancient place above the throne of glory. In other words, Kaf did not come in the front door. Kaf came in from the ceiling, from a higher place. V'izdaza, and the whole place was shaking. V'amra kamei, and the Kaf said to God, Ribon Alma, Master of the universe, Naicha kamach d'mivrei bi Alma. It should go well for you to create the world with me. Da'ana kavodach, because I am your glory. The word glory or honor is kavod, of course, and it begins with the letter kaf. Seems like a pretty good argument. That glory is, of course, the nickname for the Shekhinah, is the gematria lev of the heart, the dwelling place of the divine at a certain point in our development. Of course, the divine also will rest on the mind. But still, we see the kaf has a strong argument. Because God says, "Lichvodi barativ," for my glory I created him. God did not create man for man's glory. V'kad nachtakaf me'al korsei yekara, and it repeats the idea. And when the kaf came down from above, coming down from above, this is very important because you don't approach the king from above. You approach the king from below. He's up on the throne. If you get close enough, you bow down, you hit the deck, whatever. So the kaf is coming down from above on his throne of glory. And 200,000 worlds trembled. Now, there are a lot of numbers like that in the Zohar, 200,000 worlds. Sometimes you'll get 200,000 ribo, which is 200,000 times 10,000, which comes out to about 200 billion. And so on and so forth. You get these huge numbers, the numbers of the angels, the rankings of the angels, the number of the souls, the number of the sparks of the souls, the number of the roots that came before the sparks. You get these huge numbers. And all of it is precise and accurate according to the structure of the upper worlds. It is not a vapory, floaty, cloudy place, heaven. It's extremely precise machinery of the upper worlds. And these worlds were shaking. Now, what does it mean that a non-physical plane shakes? What does that mean? I'm sure you must have asked yourself that some time over there, over at Starbucks in between the action. Why are the worlds shaking? What's going on? Well, I think because we understand it's a non-physical plane, that we're talking about the upset of the structure. We're talking about something is challenging the structure. And of course, the structure has to stand or the whole building falls. And God did not create the world for it to fall apart. And so we understand that this shaking of the worlds, the kaf has come in and it did a little bit of a violation onto the honor, even though he's coming and saying to God, I'm your honor, I'm the word, I'm the head of the word kavod. It's a little bit dishonorable to come flying into the interview room above the crown and the throne of glory. Now, kaf, of course, is the first letter in the word keter, which is crown. So that's also an argument for the kaf. But let's see where it goes. So these 200,000 worlds trembled. This da'azah korsaya, and the throne itself was trembling. And all the worlds were shaking and about to fall, which is not good for anybody, not the angels and not the human beings way down here. Amar la kucha brichu. So God answered to the kaf, ma tavadhacha. What are you doing? The lo ivrei bachalma. That I'm not going to create the world with you. Tuv latrach, go back to your place. So this is like the harshest God has spoken to any of the letters. He doesn't say something nice like he did to all the other letters. Oh, it's fitting that I should build the world with you, Bet. No, actually, we haven't gotten to Bet yet because that is the final. That's the $600,000 question. No, why did God choose the Bet? We'll get there, hopefully. But all the other letters he spoke nicely, and here he's telling the kaf, get back to your place. What are you doing here? Why are you doing what you've done? I'm not going to create the world with you. Because it in you is the concept of kalaya, to make an end of things, destruction. Kalaya is a just destruction. And he brings a pasuk from Yeshayahu, Chalav nechretza ishtama. And there was that destruction and a desolation was heard. So, it's a very interesting take on the letter Kaf. And we'll talk more about it in a second. But Tuv, Lokosayech, go back to your throne. We haven't been told that any of the other letters have a throne. Why is the Kaf getting a throne? Well, it is, the Keter. And the Keter, of course, is the Torah. There's the rabbis explain there are Shalosh Katarim Hen, Keter Torah, Keter Chochma, and Keter Malchut. The Keter, Keter Kahuna, excuse me. Torah and Chochma are the same. The crown of the Kahuna, the Kohanic tribe, the crown of wisdom or Torah, and the crown of kingship. Those are the three crowns. So Kaf and the concept of crown is very important to God. But here he's throwing it back in the Kaf's face and telling you, no, your destruction. Tuvlu korsayach, but go back to your throne, Havetaman, and be there. And at that time, the Kaf left, but Tavat Duchta, and it went back to its place. Okay. What's with the Kaf? Why is the Kaf seems like the most arrogant letter? What's going on? Well, the Kaf, I'll tell you, there's secrets woven into every letter. A Shin, the name Shin, of course, is a letter Shin, but a Shin is also a tooth. Why? Why does the name for a tooth, why does God give the name for a tooth? That same name gives to the letter Shin. So automatically we have to ask, well, obviously there must be a connection between the idea of the Shin, which we know represents fire, and the idea of teeth, which are called Shinayim, Shin. Well, here, Kaf, what does Kaf mean? Kaf itself, the name of the letter, is the palm of the hand. The palm of the hand is a Kaf. Now, what's so mystical about that? Well, the rabbis tell us a lot of things about the hands. In halacha, the rabbis use the phrase "yadayim askaniot hen." They use that in an argument why the Kohanim would have to wash their hands all the time when they're in the service in the Beit HaMikdash, because anytime, okay, we're supposed to wash our hands too, let's face it, but we're not in the Beit HaMikdash. So if I wipe the top of my head, I don't hit a bunch of Brill cream or styling cream. I get the dome, right? But there's sweat. So sweat is something that we're supposed to wash our hands of before we put on tefillin or before we daven. We're supposed to wash our hands. It's a part of the purification process. In the Mikdash, we're talking about korbanot and highly sensitive material, and bringing atonement to the owners of the animals and to the nation and to a community, into a city, etc. And everything has to be very, very precise to achieve that ultimate level of atonement and purity. So the Kaf, the hand, the rabbis say, no, the hand, you can never trust your hands. Your hands will always touch something that they shouldn't touch. You have to wash your hands. And if you don't remember, if you did, you still wash your hands. In other words, you scratch under your arm, that's a place that you're not supposed to touch when you're doing service in the Beit HaMikdash. Your shoe, not supposed to touch your shoe. Now you could say, man, Avraham, come on, this is too hard to live this way. It sounds like it is, but if you're a Kohen in the Beit HaMikdash and you had the Shekhinah revealed before you, believe me, you would be running to wash your hands anytime you needed to. But okay, without jumping too hard on that, the idea of the hand, of course, is that it's that opposing thumb also, right? That without, see my hand now, that's a cuff, right? That's the shape cuff. So this shape here is the shape of grasping. And it is one of the most dangerous tools that a human being has, is his hand. Most violence begins, well, in the physical world, it begins with the hand. You know, the weapons are grasped by the hand. The hands make weapons. The hands hurt people. The hands do wonderful things, obviously. But the hand is a very powerful tool. And the opposing thumb, of course, makes us even more dangerous. And so I think if we want to stretch it a little bit, we can see that the letter Kaf is not, it's not innocent. It's in the most proud place. It's on God's head, the Keter. And he represents glory, the Shekhinah in the heart. And he carries God's glory as a concept. And, you know, glory is a very, very difficult thing to handle. Now, most of us, I assume, are not very famous, very well known, very gloriously inclined. Now, I'm not talking about narcissism. That's just that's a psychological syndrome that's based on insecurity and a lot of other things. We're not going to go there. That's something you got to talk about with your therapist. But the narcissistic syndrome, which is very strong in America, though it is like the inside of a weak ego. However, a strong ego, a person who's really is strong, has reason to be strong. You know, how hard is it to be humble when you're a billionaire, when you're a president, when you're a general, when you're an admiral, or even when you're a CEO? So there's something built into this letter with this concept of kavod, of glory, of power. And God calls the letter down immediately. So it's an interesting take, I think, to understand that power, you know, what is it, the old cliche that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? I don't know if that's Churchill or somebody said that. Churchill, by the way, was very learned in Tanakh as a English schoolboy. That's the way they used to teach him in the academies over there. And he knew Bible. I don't know how much Rashi he knew, but, you know. But still, honor to those who, anyone who tries to learn Torah. Nonetheless, he also tried to help the Jews, but I think he had a lot of opposition there. Anyways, so the letter Kaf is a problematic letter. It's proven itself. It's come flying into the throne room. It's demanded that God create the world with him. And God says, go back, go back. This is not the style. This is not the way I want. But no, okay, no, let's go deeper. We went there already before in earlier discussions. Wait a minute, but it's God creating these things. It's not like he doesn't have power over what he's creating. But this is a very deep, deep secret. That anytime God creates anything positive, automatically the opposite inverse concept is created. It's very simple. You learn it in ninth grade English class. It's called opposites. It's called the moment God says, "Thou shalt not kill." There's a desire in the human race to kill. Thou shalt honor your parents. Immediately, there's a desire to dishonor our parents. That's the creation of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is the opposite inverse of all the holiness of all the commands. And so it's that opposite, but because if I don't have the concept of love, there's no concept of hate. But the minute you introduce the positive concept, you automatically have to introduce the negative one. And that's true in spatial geometry as well. If I say to you, go east, it means, well, why not west? If I say, look up, well, no, I want to look down. We have that, there's the kind of this reactionary thing in us, in human beings, I've noticed that a lot of people just will be contradictory just for the sake of the fight, you know, just to get the juice going. And some people carry it to the point of pathos, but really it's something that we have to kind of look at in ourselves and try to say, wait a minute, why do I want to argue with what my wife just said? What am I here to gain from this? Why can't I just agree? See, but it's because of this subtlety of creation that got every single concept has its opposite. And we invite it in the room. The minute I say I love you, a person, if you ever notice, you say someone, I love you to somebody, and they say, why? No, that's not an appropriate answer. What do you want? A resume of why I love you? No, you're just supposed to say thank you. That's wonderful. That's so nice. But it's, so you see, there's an oppositional force in us that's the Yetzirah, and we're here to work on that. Okay, so Kaf has got some great power, some great light. It's one of the top sphirot, represents Keter, the highest sphira. It is a letter that is, let's see, if I go down the tree of life in my mind here, Beged Kefert. It represents, oh, that makes sense. It represents the connection between Beged Kefert. It represents the connection between Chesed and Netzach, the idea of kindness and the idea of victory. See, so Kaf is about that victory. You know, it's that crown on the head of the king after he wins the war. So the Kaf was not appropriate to use him to create the world. All right. And as we learned already, the Lamed and the Kaf so also were not, because they're part of Melech. So let's go forward. We've got some more. We're almost there, folks, believe it or not. We have another page and a half. Maybe we could do it tonight and finish it. You guys have coffee? It's, the Allah Ot Yud. Now the letter Yud comes in. Everybody loves Yud because it's so humble and simple. And Yud also corresponds to Yad, like Kaf, but it's a different concept of the hand. Yad el Kes Yah. The hand is on the, well, that's a construct with Amalek, but the hand is not the Kaf. It's a different idea because it includes the fingers, not just the palm. Anyways, Amra Kameh Ribon Alma Naicha Kamach Mivrebi Alma. The Yud says also, God, it should go well. Create me with the world with me. Ansheruta Dishma Kadisha. I am the first letter in your holy name. And it is fitting that you should create me with the world because, I'm the first letter in your name. But already we should know, wait a minute. We've had this before. The letter's using its place in God's name and conceptual reality to justify being the first letter in the Torah. But no, you already have too important a job. And so what does God say? Amarle, no, Yud. Dailach, it's enough for you. That you are engraved in me, letter Yud. That's a pretty big compliment. The Antreshimbi, and you are embossed, you are impressed, you are impression. Hakik is to inscribe, and Rashim is to impress. It's not. There's inscribing is where you remove material like rock, and then you leave behind an image. Whereas impression is where you leave an image in a pre-existing surface without removing material. That's actually very deep. It's not just, craft shop, shop class in ninth grade. It's really has to do with the way we form letters in our mind's eye in meditation. That when we form letters and we sit down to meditate, we want to see God's glorious name in front of us. We're doing an act of rishima and hakika, of engraving and impressing upon the mental space of our mind. It's a very important, powerful thing. Okay. So that's the type of thing that it really is where I really work one-on-one with people in this type of level of meditation, because everybody's mind is different, everybody's focus and ability is different. Okay. And so now here's an even greater compliment Hashem pays the Yud. I wonder how the Kaf feels right now. The Yud's getting all the compliments. You're engraved in me, you're impressed in me. And now he tells him, and all my desire goes through you. How's that? God's desire, that's a pretty big thing. How does it go through a little Yud? All my desire goes up through you. Late ant yeut litakara min shmi. And it is not fitting to uproot you from my name, to make you the first letter in the Torah, because you're already in a very important place. You are the first letter in my name. And what the secret here, though, is that God is telling you is that all his desire is channeled through the name. Now think of God's desire as a stream of energy. And it's going to start at the Yud, and it's going to flow from the Yud into the Hey. And it's going to flow from the top of the Hey to the bottom, and then to the left foot of the Hey, the front foot of the Hey. It's going to go in there. Then it's going to come out of that Hey, that Yud, and it's going to, because the front foot of a Hey is another Yud, right? And then the letter is going to flow up to the top of the Vav and flow down again to create a Vav. And then it's going to flow up to create the final Hey. So you see, all of that is God's desire. Now, Rabbi Nachman teaches about this specifically, that he uses his wisdom to shape the letters, but his desire is embedded in that wisdom. I want it to be this way. You ever go to my wife's a painter. If I dare enter her studio when she's painting and open my mouth, I'm in trouble, right? You do not interrupt the painter when she's painting. And I know when I sit down to write, it's not easy to be interrupted, because your mind is on a track, you're on a flow, and that flow of focus is part of your desire. And to have your desire clipped by an interruption, whether it's your phone or your kids or your neighbor or whatever, it's not so pleasant. And so we can understand this, metaphorically, we can understand that there is this desire flowing through us, even through the Aleph Bet. So that's why it's so important to stay attached to the letters at whatever level of Hebrew you're speaking. It doesn't matter, because that's part of why I chose to use these letters as the focus of our meditation as well, because you don't have to be a master in Hebrew to master using letters of meditation to establish dveikut, attachment to God, which is really our goal here. Of course, to be in this world is to bring him here and attach ourselves to him here. All right. So when we understand that the letter is flowing with Ratzon, it's starting with the Yud right here. It tells us. And therefore, we can't move you, Yud. You got to stay right where you are. Tough. Now the tough comes in. Excuse me, did I say tough? Tet. Now we had tet earlier. We were told about the tet that it's like a coiled snake. Remember that? If you look at the tet, you got this little head there, and he goes down and up and around and back. It's like almost like a snake. Now maybe in some childhood books, you could say it looks like a snail. It's a little more pleasant image, but they're both impure nonetheless. Tet is a problematic letter. Amar kameh ribalama. The tet goes on with the same formula before God. He says, "Nicha b'kamach," right? It's good that you create the world with me. Sha'ant bi ikri atuv v'yashar, because in me you're called good and honest, straight and true. Amarla, no, God said to the tet, Lo evrabach alma, I'm not going to create the world with you. Zahatuvech satim begavech. Now listen to this charge. God tells the tet, well, I'm not going to use you to create the world, because you're good. The good that you're bragging about is hidden within you. Zahatuvech satim begavech. It's within you. With safun, and it's hidden within you. In other words, God's presenting it. It's not a good thing to have your goodness hidden. It's not a good thing for the letter tet to hide its goodness. Rabbi Nachman said we have to try to be very humble in this world. And let's say you're a master doctor. It doesn't look very nice when you walk into town and you tell everybody, I'm the greatest heart surgeon that ever lived. It doesn't sound quite, humble. But he says, if you are the only person who could fix somebody's heart and you could save a life, then you have to tell everybody in town, I am a heart surgeon. If you need somebody, here's my card. So there's a responsibility that comes with wisdom. There's a responsibility that comes with your talent, whatever it is. And we need to we're not taking ourselves seriously. We're taking the gifts that God gives us seriously. And that's a big difference, because it's not about my ego or your ego. It's about the particular mission that God gave each of us. And so here we see the Tet. Well, we're not sure what the Tet's mission yet is, but we know that him bragging about being good, God's calling him on and saying, well, you might be good, but you're hiding it. So you're not supposed to hide it necessarily, but you have to find a humble way of expressing your truth that you can be there for others. Okay, now. So God says to him, Lo evre bacham, I'm not going to create the world with you because of what we just said. It's hidden. It's written in the Tehillim. Marav tuvcha. What is your great goodness? Asher tzafanta l'recha, that you have gazed upon in the future for those who fear you. That's another allusion to the world to come. Mata tuvcha. Right? What is your goodness? What goodness is you have foreseen for those who fear you? Now that sounds like, well, that's a pretty positive thing to say about the idea of good, but it's hidden in the future. It's not revealed now. Although I think a lot of it's getting revealed slowly as time unfolds. He says, because your goodness is hidden within you, your portion, you have no portion in the world. That I want to create. Wait a second. I'm not that happy with that translation. Yeah, he tells the letter Tet, you have no portion in the world that I want to create. So he swings it back. He says, no, it's not that you're a bad letter or something, but you are really a letter that's hiding the world to come. A great gift. And because your great goodness is hidden within you. Listen to this. This is nice. Because of your great goodness is hidden within you. Yitva'u sha'arei ahechal. There is within you are inscribed the gates of the palace. Now, which gates and what palace? Could be the Beit HaMikdash, could be Gan Eden also. And of course, there's many levels of Gan Eden. I see there's some interesting comments. We'll get to that in just let me finish this paragraph. So he's telling the letter Tet, look, you are going to have a great portion of the world to come, and because all your goodness is hidden, because all the goodness of the world to come is hidden in this world too. So the Tet is a perfect metaphor for the hidden goodness that is missing in this world. As it is written, he tells him, Tavu ba'aretz shareha, that your gates were swallowed up in the land. That doesn't sound good. That's from Eicha. Eicha's Lamentations. That's what we read after the destruction in Tisha B'Av. Why is he bringing that here when we're talking about praising the letter Tet as being a symbol of the world to come in the gates of God, the gates of heaven? Well, he tells us more. But two, and furthermore, Dechet lekavlech. You are next to the letter Chet, right? The letter Tet follows the letter Chet. And when the Het and the Tet get together, it's not pretty. That spells sin. Chet. Alken otiot elu. Therefore, these letters, lo rushumot v'shvatim, the letter chet and the letter tet. If you look through all the 12 tribes of Israel, none of those tribes have used the letter chet or tet in their names, which is quite interesting if you think about it. 12 tribes, that's a lot of letters, a lot of names. Now, they're very short names, mostly God, Don, God, Asher, 2, 3. Yisachar is a longer name, but there's no chet and there's no tet in the names of God. And of course, those names are engraved on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Now, so therefore, God says, I cannot use you to create the world. Kat miyat nafkat mikame. And so the letter chet and the letter tet are removed from the story. So again, we're getting another sensitivity to these letters, what they represent and why they are what they are, and the concepts that they create. Okay. Alat Ot Zion. Now Zion comes in. Isn't it good that you should create the world with me? The letter Zion. Because in me, your children keep Shabbat, the seventh day. And Zion is obviously the seventh letter. That seems kind of a weak argument. Because the Shabbat is the seventh day, I'm going to choose, you should choose me to create the world. I don't know. Seems stretched logic, but it says, Zachoret Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho, right? Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. Amar la lo mivrei bachalma. God answers the Zion directly. The ant that you eat bach, karva, v'harva, the shinana, rumacha, the karva, kegavna, denun. Miyad nafkat mikame. What is all this? God is telling the letter Zion, okay, you tell me how great you are because you're the seventh letter and it's Shabbat to keep you, but you are also the tool of weapon, of warfare. Karva is battles, the harba is sword, the shinina of the warfare, shanuna, cherev shanuna, shanuna, that means double-edged sword, excuse me. Rumacha and the javelin or the lance, right? The karva of the battlefield, kagavda de nun, like the letter nun. Why brings in the letter nun here? Interesting. Well, because I guess they used to have a weapon that was shaped like a nun. If you, I don't know, remember some of those old-fashioned biblical warfare movies? They had some strange-looking weapons. Okay, so he tells them, look, I'm sorry, Zion, you represent, and look, what does the word Zion mean? The word Zion means weapon. And it looks like a weapon. It's got a long handle with a hatchet head on top, an axe head. So just the graphics of the letter tell its story. And God doesn't want to create the world with a letter that represents weaponry. Okay, Allah Tod Vav, Amra Kameh Ribon Amim. The Vav came in and said the same thing that we have over and over. Trying to speed up a bit, folks. The Ana Ad Bishme, I'm also in your name. Dudke Vavke, Amar Le Vav, Vehe Dai Nachon, Datun, Atun, Bishmo, Dishmi. It's enough for you, letter Vav and letter Hey, that you are also part of my infinite, eternal name. That you are that of the you announce my name, you give over my name into the world, and you are engraved and inscribed in my name. Lo ivre bachu alma. And therefore I can't create the world with you, Hey and Vav. Allah Daled V'Gimel. Now the Daled and Gimel came in. Amru Ofachi, also here. Amar Uflon. Interesting. Daha miskanin lo yitbatlun min alma v'tzrichin ligmol imahon tivu. Okay, what's going on here? What's this response? The Dalit and the Gimel, what did they do? And God says, it's enough for you, Dalit and Gimel, to stay together in the order of the Aleph Bet. I don't need to push you to the first letter in the Torah. Why? Just because we're next to each other? What have we created? What concept has been created that we can't be moved? Well, he gives the Zohar gives this example, this reasoning. That the poor people, lo yifsaku min olam. Oy, oy, oy. There will always be poor people in the world. Utzrichlim l'gemol imahem tov. And we have to give goodness to the poor. It is part of the human way and the Torah way. Okay, well, where do we see well, Gimel represents Gemilut Hasadim. But where Dalit? Dalit, the Zohar says, he ani. Dalit is the Lashon Daliyah, a poor. A Dal is a poor person. So Dalit represents the poor, and Gimel represents the giver, the Gimal, the Gemilut Hasadim. So it's the Gimel is giving to the Dalit. So it's, you see the representation. It's kind of sweet. The letter Gimel is the camel. A Gamal is a camel. And what does a camel do its whole life? It helps human beings cross the desert. The camel was the chief architect. No, I shouldn't say architect. That's a bit much. The chief tool of transportation for thousands of years. How much kindness did the camels do the human race? And this is the idea of gimilah, of giving over something. And the dalit is the dalah, the poor person who needs to receive. Lo tifradna zo min zo, and I will not separate you, dalit and gimel. And it's enough that you have each other. You know, I don't know, folks. I guess you have to be satisfied with God's answer if you're a dalit or a gimel. Let's see what else is happening over here. And Michael writes, the yud is in all the letters, isn't it? That's absolutely correct. We are told in the earlier Hakdamah of the Zohar, or that all creation begins with a yud, including, of course, all the other letters. Isn't the yud being greedy? Well, you know, you could say that about a lot of the letters then, couldn't you, Rhonda? I hear you. I'm not sure that I use the word greedy. Maybe God is trying to teach us that there's pride. There's this undercurrent of pride in the Aleph Bet. And maybe it's his pride that he invested in them, in the letters. Which is an interesting idea because, you know, let's face it, a true Jew that really embraces who he is and what he is and why he's here has pride in that mission. I know I discovered that after wandering around this world a few decades. But to be a Jew is something to hold my head high for. Now, is it my pride? Is it Avraham Shira? I don't think so. But I carry the name of something much greater. And the world knows it by now that the Jew is a special entity. We talked about that in a class on Facebook this week about the idea of the Am Segula. What is the Am Segula? The treasured nation, the nation of the gift, of the charm, of the refuah. No, it's a special thing to be a Jew. Does it mean we're better? I don't like the word better. I don't think it's a good word. Does it mean we're special? Yes. Does it mean everybody else is special? Yes. Does it mean that everybody has to discover their specialness? Yes. Including the Jews. But that's part of God created the world that we have to discover our specialness. Otherwise, we get bored, you know? What can I tell you? Part of doing tshuva is discovering not we're not bad boys, bad girls trying to be good people. We're good people to begin with. And we're just our job is to discover that specialness. Okay. So we finally arrived at the letter bet. Alat ot bet. The letter bet came in. Amra le ribon alma. And what's the bet's argument? That he should be the first letter in the Torah. Naicha kamach lemevre bi alma. It's fitting that you create the world with me. Devi mevarchan lach le'ela v'tata. Because in me, because I, the bet, represent the concept of blessing, that in me, blessing, you will be blessed above and below. The angels will bless you, the human beings will bless you, the animals will bless you in their own way. Amarlach kucha berichu, and God said, Ha, v'dai bach avre balma. Certainly I'm going to create you. I'm going to create the world with you, Ot Bet. So obviously, God jumped right into it. It's very special to God, this idea of being blessed. It's not stam. It's not just, okay, it's good for us to bless. Amivarech mitbarech. The one who blesses is blessed. Avram, God blessed Avram. Whoever blesses you will be cursed. I mean, well, gosh, everybody whoever blesses you will be blessed, and whoever curses you will be cursed. But from the rapidity, the swiftness of God's answer, what I'm getting here is that this is really important to Hashem. The V that in me, Od Bet says, Mivarachin la leila latata. And God says, Hu havadai bach evrei alma. Certainly, clearly, I will create the world with you. To ant tehe sheruta lemivrei alma. You will be the first in the creation of the world. Now, as Mike, you just said, the Yud is still a necessity but the minute the sofer takes his quill and hits the cloth with the ink, he's made a Yud. And what happens is he has to drag the ink into the top bar of the bet and then curve it down to make the wall of the bet. So, but it still began with the Yud. So it's not a contradiction. Now, wait a minute. So, okay, what about the letter Aleph? What about poor Aleph at the beginning of the Aleph bet, at the end? Kamech ot Aleph lolat. What's happened? The letter Aleph stood at the entryway but didn't enter. Oh, Aleph is hurt. His feelings are hurt. The letter Aleph stood up and didn't enter. Amarla kuchabrichu. Aleph, Aleph. Lama leitan ta'alat kamai. Why are you not coming in before me? Kishar kol atvan, like all the rest of the letters. Amra kamei ribon alma. The letter Aleph said, Master of the universe, begin the Hameina Kol Advan Nafku Min Kamach Blo Tolta. Well, Master of the universe, I've seen that all the letters have come before you, and it has not helped them. Ma Anna Avid Taman. What am I going to do there? You turn back the kaf, you turn back the mem, you turn back all the letters except the bet. Why do I need to even go into the parlor, to the interview room? But two, and furthermore, Taha Yahivta La'at Bet Nivaz Vezar of Ravada. Oi. And he goes on, the letter Aleph goes on to say, you already gave the letter Bet, the matana, this great gift. ולא יאות למלך עליון להעביר מתנה שנתן לעבדו לתת לאחר. And it is not fitting for the king of the world, the master of the universe, to give a gift to one person and then take it away and give it to somebody else. God, we have that phrase from childhood again. God is not a giver, an Indian giver. I don't think that's PC anymore, right, folks? I don't think the Indians would like it. Well, we'll have to erase that from the lexicon of slang. I'm sure it's probably based on some incident that whatever. But really, God is not fitting. We're told here in the Holy Zohar, thousands of years before there were, Indians and pilgrims at Plymouth Rock. We're told over here that it wouldn't be fitting. You already gave your gift to the bed. So I know that you're not going to give it to me. So why do I need to go in there? Amarla kuchabarichu. Oy, Aleph, God says. Af al pisha ot beit ba ivra olam. Even though that I will create the world with the letter bet. Ant tiyeh rosh lekol otiot. Nevertheless, Ot Aleph, you will be the head of all the letters. Ein bi yichud elabach, and I have no unification except through you. Right, and that's why you have the Aleph is shaped like it is, with a yud on top and a yud on the bottom and a line above in the middle. This idea of unification is reflected in the structure of the Aleph. So you see, God is come around to Aleph's humility. You will be the head of all the letters, and I will be unified only through you. Bach yitchilu kol cheshbonot. Then you, all accountings, all calculations will begin with you, because you're not only the first letter, but you are the number one in Gematria. V'kol ma'aseh olam, and all the actions and deeds of the world, the kol yichud, and every unification, lo yeh ela ba'ot aleph. It's all going to begin with the letter aleph. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of the discourse in its simplicity. However, there is another small paragraph by way of conclusion. Well, good night, Rena. We'll see you later. See, you have to go. And God made great elevated letters, and smaller letters from below. And because of this, bait, the letter bait, in Bereshit, bara, aleph, Elohim, at, otiot, milamala, otiot, milamata. Right, we have the bet of Bereshit, and we have the bet of bara, and we have the aleph of Elohim, and we have the aleph of at, or et, Bereshit bara et, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et ha'aretz. So we have these two letters repeating themselves. Otiot milamala, otiot milamata, v'kulan ka'achat hen, but all of them are one. Hen v'hameha'olam elyon, v'me'olam tachton. From the upper spiritual world down to the lower physical world, they are one. They are in perfect alignment, connection, and energy transposition, if you will. Forgive me that word. Okay. Well, it feels like a good thing that we finished tonight. It's always a gift and a pleasure to finish any Ma'amar of the Zohar. Of course, there's always more and more commentary and more ideas, but we're going to stop here as far as this particular Ma'amar. And let's look at the clock. Where are we? We are at 1 o'clock. Well, we have time to meditate if you all would like to. We have time to talk if we'd rather do that. How's everybody's, where are we at? Okay, Michael says we can unmute ourselves. Meditate, please, Cindy says. Very nice.
Can we meditate and then process?
Sure. And Miriam writes, thank you so much, Rabbi. Someday, would you please talk about the 13th gate in the Zohar? Aha. I'll have to look that up. It's a very interesting idea. I'll have to look that up, and I'll make a note in my book, because that's what I do. Otherwise, it might not get done. "13th gate." Now you got me curious. Now, there are many, many gates in Zohar literature referring to different levels in the tree of life. So we always have to we become ever more specific as we go. But okay. Shoshana would like to meditate on the letter best.
Bet.
Because I need a house. Oh, a bet. Because I need a house to dwell in. Oh, we need a blessing.
Yep.
God should bless you with a new house, a beautiful space, a pure space, the holy space. That will
Amen.
give abundant joy and peace and comfort and security. And he should do it with a minimum of effort, with a maximum of his miraculous power. And when you believe in miracles, they happen. And the more you believe in the miracle, the more power you give to it. So don't ever question Hashem's miraculous power. It's not about my power. It doesn't matter you're, whoever you are, up or down on the scale of human beings. It's about his continuous presence is a miracle, and we need that for the blessing. Okay. So let's do some meditation. We have some time. So let's get comfortable. And make sure all our devices are not going to interrupt us. And let's get comfortable. Oh. After talking for an hour, it's really pleasant to meditate. I can tell you. So do what you have to do to get comfortable. Make sure no one's gonna bother you, inside, outside. Find a comfortable posture in your chair. Our back straight, our shoulders just kind of falling into place. In meditation, we don't need to sit at attention, although there are times when you feel that you must sit at attention, because when the divine light enters us, it really does cause a shift in our posture. It's kind of like sitting before the king. When I first got to yeshiva, the Yeshiva Mekubalim in Yerushalayim, that we don't slouch when we learn Torah. That's not the way you sit before a king. It's to slouch. And we don't cross our legs, and we don't fold our hands. We just let everything find its own comfortable, natural place. And we begin to breathe. Long, deep, blessed breathing. The end of a long week. The end of a week of noise. a week of trial, challenge, distraction, difficulties. Yet now they are not here. Only we are here in the gift of our breath. Be with your breath as though you sit with your beloved. Love your breath. Love how it enters you, cools your nose, your olfactory glands, your neck and throat, down into your lungs. And all is calmer. And calm is good. Calm is the state of creation before God began to create. Calm is the state where we return to our center, to our place, to our truth. Holy breath, may all the people who have difficulty breathing be blessed to breathe again with the godly power in the breath to create a world, to create a life, to create an idea, to create a feeling. It all begins with breath. Perhaps you need to create a house or a car or a spouse, something precious, or you would like a child or a new job. You are a creator in the image of your creator. Own that power. Own that responsibility of power. Begins in the mind as an image. Travels to the mouth as a prayer. The impulse travels further to the hands to reach into the world, to change the world with the acts of our hands. Do I own the power of creation? No. Yet I own that I am a creator. And that was why I was created. To be a creator for God. Perhaps I'm afraid to fail, or afraid to succeed, or afraid my creation will draw ridicule. Breathe through the fear. It is all the external noise. It is all that which we know is not true, and yet somehow we allow it to exist in our hearts, something that's not true. Rabbi Nachman teaches us all fear is the place we have yet to return to God. The actions, the speeches, the thoughts that are below me, that are not of me, of my true level. I need to return those, to remove them, to do teshuvah. And then when we're without fear, the miracle occurs. I believe in myself. I believe in my power to create. Why should it be any other way? Continue breathing. Long, sweet, holy breathing. Each person with his own rhythm, his own power, his own connection to ultimate power. With each breath, the mind is fed new fuel to think again, to process, to contemplate, to weigh, to question, to compare. These are the tools of healthy thinking. The world wants to take them away, to take our breath, to take our fuel, to take our creativity. Is the world to blame? Not entirely. For I am commanded to guard the gift of my soul, that creative entity at the depth of our being, that dynamo of endless power. I must guard it and be wise and modest. See the thing that you want to create in your mind's eye. See it with every shape and color, with every nuance that you can imagine. See your life's work. Don't be afraid to dream big. If I dream small, I get small. Why not dream big and receive the greatness of God's blessing? See yourself in that new house, in that new car, in that new job, holding that new baby, that new spouse, that new family. It is there, waiting to express itself through you. And there's nothing to fear. That is true knowledge, rectified knowledge. There is no tree of good and evil. There is only the tree of life, life force, all goodness at the top of reality, above the world of duality, above the world of good and evil, which drags on us with thousands of years of gravity. But it can only drag my body, it cannot hold my soul. Return to breath, life, confidence in God, confidence in yourself, and let them be one. Okay. Let us come back to the world of the senses. This is where we are. So next week, you have to remind me. I'll put a note in though. Let's talk about this. Let's see what happens this week. Let's show God we're serious. We want to see the manifestation of our meditations. It should be a blessed week. So I thank all of you. Shabbat Shalom.
Oh man, you too.
And we'll hear good news. Maybe we'll have to start a miracle journal.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Definitely.
Rabbi Shira.
Thank you, Rabbi Shira. Thank you.
Have a great Shabbos,
We'll
everyone.
see you next week. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Thank you. Shabbat
All the
Shalom.
best to
Thank
all.
you, Michael.